Team of teams. If you're wondering where that came from, well, I'm going to share that with you. And you're probably wondering, what is this crazy diagram to my left-hand side? Or maybe you're right. But it came from a book called Team of Teams, and it was written by General Stanley McChrystal. General McChrystal had 34 years with the U.S. Army, and his last role was he was in charge of all the U.S. forces in Afghanistan. And in his book, he talks about how teams, in order to be successful, really had to change the way they think and how they operate. If you think about the military, the traditional structure is command and control. Someone's at the top, they tell people at the next level what to do, and that goes all the way down the line. Well, he describes how to be successful as and nimble, that the U.S. military had to change the way they thought and how they operated. In fact, we have to equip the frontline people with as much information as possible so that way they can make a good decision in the moment. And this is really the network I see that Team HRX is running. You all take ownership, you own the moment, you try to tackle any issue, and if you do need help, you reach out. But the great thing is you've got a great leader, and Kelly gives you the autonomy to make a good decision and is always there to stand behind you. So in addition to the book Team of Teams, I'll be drawing on a book by Patrick Lencioni called The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The reason I'm doing that is this will help us dissect where our team is strong and where we have some room for improvement. Now, we know we have a great team, and that's the feedback I've gotten, and it's my experience working with you. But in the spirit of the point twos, we realize we can get even better. And when we're even better as a team HRX, we can support the rest of the team members in the Hilton organization. And when we do that, it leads to better moments and it leads to our next 100 years. So what I'm going to do is we're going to hit each one of these 5 dysfunctions, and I'm going to ask you to read, reflect, and think about them. And as you think about them, be prepared when we get together in our virtual session to have a good, healthy discussion around it. By the end, we should have identified not only what we do well and what we want to continue to do, but what are some areas we can do to get even better. And then we're going to put it all together through follow-up huddles, which we're going to ask you to facilitate so this team can get even better than it is today. I know it's hard to believe. So once again, as in the previous module we did, I'm going to ask you to print out the participant guide. Looks like this. It just has the slides with room for you to write down your comments here. So as you go through this video with me, have that handout there ready and jot down notes, insights, etc. So that way, when we get together in our virtual session, you'll be ready to add some comments and make it a super vibrant and robust discussion. Okay? All right, so the first thing is I asked everyone to do that survey, that online survey, and I'm going to forward to you the results of that survey. And what you can take a look at is what the team scored the team did in the certain criteria. So you'll be able to see in each 5 dysfunctions how you rated. If you're an 8 or a 9, that means you're knocking it dead in that area. If it's in between 3 and 5, then this is probably an area we need to take a look at. And then if you're in that middle zone, it's one you probably execute fairly well, but maybe you could get a little bit more consistent. So when you get those results, refer back to the handout, take a look at it, and be prepared to share some comments when we get together based on what the team evaluated the team as. Sound good? See you there. So after we've talked about the team results, which I don't have yet, but I will have to you, and we'll be able to have the conversation on the virtual call, we're going to talk a little bit about what teamwork is. When you think about teamwork, it's a term that's thrown around a lot, and it can mean a lot of different things. These are a few things that I came up with, and I'd love to hear your feedback and what you'd like to add to this list or change, right? But I think one thing that a great team has in common is they have a common goal. They know where they're going, and there's complete clarity on where that is, right? What does good look like from our team? I think you guys do a pretty darn good job there. The second thing is the team all rowing in the same direction? Think about the visual of you all being in a boat, maybe in one of those boats where Vikings there and people are rowing their boat, right? Can you imagine if someone just stuck their oars in the water and just held firm? Or maybe they're going backwards, right? Obviously, it's going to put a drag on the team. It's going to put a drag on the boat. And, sometimes these are subtle little drags that we put on. Maybe we're not pulling as hard as everyone else. Maybe we're, doing every other stroke, right? But a great team is in sync and they're rowing in the same direction. The other thing that struck a chord with me is great teams are great teams because they choose to be. It starts with a choice. And that choice is individual, up to you, saying, I am going to be a great team member, and you're going to expect that from your fellow team members as well. And as we get into the 5 dysfunctions as a team, we'll talk a little bit more about how we hold each other accountable, because that's really important. But at the end of the day, I think Hilton is a great example of what a great team is. You would not have gotten to 100 years unless you were doing some things really well. So on that handout, right, take a moment, jot down some notes, and get ready to talk about this on our virtual call. So any great team also operates by a group of core values. I'm not sure what yours are, but from the outside looking in, I think you really So any great team operates by a standard of core values, kind of who they are, the behaviors, the things they do. And as I looked at the HRX team, I think these 3 kind of embody who you are and the type of team members that join this team. And they're pretty transcendent. They kind of, if you look at any great team, they can probably have these same attributes, but of course it's about bringing them to life. So the first is being humble, right? That's somebody who's coachable, who's not, always putting up a fight or resistant to change, right? They always kind of slow down and think, how can I be a little bit better? And they look internally first. And I know I like working with people who are humble. And I think we have to be careful that being humble doesn't mean thinking less of yourself, right? You've got great skills. That's why you're here, right? But being humble is really about thinking about yourself less. Make sense? And I can think of people on your team who just live this, right? And that's somebody I want on my team. Secondly is someone who's hungry, right? Someone who's not just willing to just get by, right? Someone who really wants to deliver a great performance, who is hungry to improve personally, is hungry for the team to improve, and just is in general thrives on doing a great job. Kind of that hunger to be better, not just willing to go with the status quo. And the last thing is smart people, right? Now, this is not necessarily IQ smart, because man, if it were, I wouldn't be part of any team. But it's really about being smart in terms of looking at processes you do, right? Can it get a little bit better? Doing some research, thinking about that, maybe reaching out to other people. But it's that emotional intelligence, because teams that have a good chemistry and can, understand people's personal situations and things like that, who bring the EQ into it, really, that's kind of that sixth sense that I think makes a big difference. So write down some comments. What do you think about these 3 core values? What ones would you add to the team HRX if we were to put together our core values? More on the virtual huddle. Okay, now we're going to jump into the 5 dysfunctions as a team. And as we go through this, I'll do 1 or 2 slides on each one of these functions, and I'm going to ask you to jot down your comments as well. So as you can see, the base of the triangle is trust. And if a team doesn't have trust, it's hard for them, or almost impossible for them, to do anything above this. So let's talk about trust first. So trust, again, is one of those terms that gets thrown around. But think about it. If you were on a team that people didn't trust each other, how would it operate? As I talked about, we're rowing in the same direction. And if people are rowing in different directions, or sometimes we have people just trying to put a drag on the boat, that's when there's a lack of trust. So this is the core dysfunction of teams that aren't operating well. How do we define trust? Well, it's being human. All right. Now, that sounds pretty general, but being human is where you're personally invested in each other. You're willing to get to know each other, understand different people's strengths, and also being vulnerable and sharing your weaknesses, not always trying to be defensive, right? You're just super open and coachable. Um, One of the exercises that we've done in the past that we did in Own the Moment was the conversation stack. As we talked about, that's a great way to continue to get to know more, not only about your team members, but about your fellow team members and digging in and understanding a little bit more about them, what's important to them personally. And when we invest personally in one another, then, we're just more committed. We understand people's situations and strengths. And then the last thing I want to make a comment on trust here is being vulnerable. Think about a great leader. Great leaders aren't the ones who always have every single answer, or once they make a decision, it's a stake in the ground. You're not going to do anything. I don't want to hear it from you. It's people, those leaders who are really showing that, hey, I don't have all the answers, but I know together we can find them out. Or that leader who says, you know what? I fumbled the ball on this one. I'm sorry, I made a mistake, right? Or it's like, you know what? I realize this is maybe not my strong point in terms of communication. Maybe I could be a little bit better here. And you know what? When you have a leader like that who's willing to demonstrate that they also have, some opportunities to improve, you know what it does to the team? It causes them to rally around and help fill in any gaps that that leader has, but the rest of the team has. Once again, and I'm not just saying this, but I think Kelly really exemplifies this. I think Lashonda and I think Valerie and Megan and Norma, all these folks are all personally invested. And at the same time, they're not trying to be perfect, nor are they trying to project that. So I'd like you to think about this and write down your insights and thoughts to the right. And the one, if you're willing, if you will be brave on our call, what's an area that you know what, you feel like you've got some opportunity to improve, or what can you do a little bit better here? And in the meantime, as in between our calls, take a moment and use that conversation with one of your team members, maybe somebody you haven't connected with in a while, or maybe someone new. Just reach out to them and build this trust factor with them. We'll talk more about this on the virtual call. So now that we've talked about trust, and that's the foundation of that triangle. Once we have complete trust, we're willing to show our vulnerabilities. We can then go to the next step, which is fear of conflict. Again, this being the dysfunction. A team is not going to operate its best unless it's willing to step into healthy conflict. And what a great team will do is demand debate. Okay. So we don't all violently agree on everything, right? And one way to do this is by conducting a pre-mortem. So how does that work? Well, we tried to do this, I think, with the HRX. Well, what are all the reasons this is going to fail? Or what's reasons this is not going to go as good as we planned, right? We try to get those out on the table, but we're doing it with a purpose because we want to find the best solution. In great teams, they disagree, right? And they'll get into some heated discussions. They'll talk about different ideas. But when they do that at the end and you come to an agreement, you all commit, okay? But without that disagreement, it really is going to put you on shaky ground, okay? So I want you to think about this. When in the past has this team maybe had some healthy disagreement, or some people have dissented and say, well, I'm not sure if that's going to work. Have you been comfortable enough to say that? Or do you retreat back and, oh, well, you know what? Yeah, I'm going to go along with this, right? And if you say that to yourself, that's where we're having a hiccup right there. If you're just going to go along but not commit, we're not going to be as strong as we possibly can be. And then especially when we get to the next step, but write down your insights about conflict. Have you done this well in the past? Is this something, as you look forward, how can we have more disagreement than commitment? That demand debate. More on our virtual huddle. So now that we've talked about the fear of conflict, right? And if we're willing to step in and if we have a lot of trust with one another, we can have that healthy conflict. And that's not about beating other people up. It's about together as a team trying to find the best solution. It's not about you, it's about the team. And this gets us to the next step in the triangle, which is where we commit fully, okay? Teams are not going to reach their absolute potential if they lack commitment. What does it look like? Focus on clarity and closure, okay? So what does good look like? What are our goals or what are our objectives for this particular project, process, or what have you, right? But then once you commit to it, you agree to it, and there's no looking back. You're moving forward. Because if we have alligator arms, like, well, yeah, I'll give that a go or I'll try, right? But we want to make sure we're all totally committed to it. Even in the past, if we've had a disagreement, we're now moving forward and saying, I'm going to move heaven and earth to make this work. Now, a good way to kind of look at this and a good way to even hold your partners accountable, which we'll talk about in just a moment, is to ask people their level of commitment. Ask yourself, how committed am I to this on a scale of 1 to 10? 10 meaning, you know what, I am going to move forward. I wasn't 100% before this, but as a team, I know we agreed on this. I am 10. I am all in. Or, are you ranking yourself maybe more like a 5? Well, do you? If you do, hey, be real. How can you get to an 8 or a 9 or a 10? Reach out to some team members you have that trust with. Be vulnerable, right? And say, help me get there. I'm really struggling. When we do that, we're going to operate at our absolute best as a team. So where are you there? Write down your comments to the right. What are some situations maybe in the past that you've seen this? Probably not at Hilton, right? But in other organizations. And more importantly, as we look forward, what can we do to be better and fully committed to each and every decision and goal we have as a team? All right, more on the virtual huddle. Okay, we're getting closer to the top of that triangle. So I was on a flight one time and we had to depart the airport really quickly. We had our spot, and if we didn't pull out of the gate quickly and get in line for takeoff, we were going to miss an opportunity, especially with some weather coming in. So normally, as you know, the flight attendants come down the aisle and they'll check to make sure people's baggage is properly stowed, as well as turning off their cell phones and the like. Well, the pilot got on the announcement and said, hey, listen, we've got to catch this slot. If we want to, I need to ask everyone on the plane's help to just take a look around your area and make sure your bags are stowed properly, and please turn off your cell phone. And if you would, please look to the seat partners you have and just remind them, if they're still on their cell phone, remind them to shut it off for safety. If their bag's in the aisleway, if you could just please remind them. So I thought that was really interesting because in the past, I would try to fake it when the flight attendant came by, right? And they're like, almost like, a boss walking by, did you shut off your phone type of thing. But it was interesting when I was responsible for myself and then also to hold my fellow seatmates accountable to that. I went on my cell phone, right? And I was like, are they looking at me and am I looking at them? So it was interesting that accountability from my peers, my other fellow passengers, was really powerful. And I actually turned off my cell phone. So, avoidance of accountability can be a huge hiccup on a team. And if you really want to have that maximum effect in running as a team, you need to be comfortable confronting difficult issues. And what that means is having peer accountability. Is someone really not pulling their weight? Is someone got a bad attitude, right? We're not there to be the police. Because we have a lot of trust with them, we're there to help put them on the straight path and call them quickly on their stuff, if you will. Because, if you have that level of trust, it's going to help them get to where they need to be. Now, where does this start? It starts with you and looking in the mirror. You have to ask yourself, am I being accountable? Am I living up to the standards of the team? And if you can't do that, it's hard for you to point fingers as other folks. But in looking in the mirror is a good exercise. Then lastly, we've talked about this before, but having an accountability partner. So someone maybe that you're on the same team with, maybe you're just in the same site, and you actually give each other permission to hold each other accountable. So I might say, hey, Nikki, if I'm having a little bit of a bad day, maybe my attitude seems to be off, I want you to call me out on it. I'm going to be mad if you don't, okay? And you let me know what I can do for you, right? But this, again, we are reaching for the point twos in terms of how we operate as a team. This one can be uncomfortable, but it can also be a huge way on how we can deliver the best results and operate at our absolute best is when we do not avoid accountability. What are your thoughts? Jot them down in your notes to the side, and we'll talk about them more on our huddle. All right, we're at the top of the triangle, okay? And this top of the triangle represents inattention to results. Now, back in the 90s, the Chicago Bulls had 6 championships. It's a pretty amazing team. Anyway, there was a player on the team by the name of Scottie Pippen. He was an excellent shooter, one of the key reasons that team did well, but only one of the key reasons. Anyway, Phil Jackson called a timeout and he drew up a play. And when he drew up that play, he actually wanted to have the ball in the last 5 seconds of the game, not pass to Michael Jordan, not pass to Scottie Pippen, their best shooter on the team, but passed to a player by the name of Tony Kukoc. Now, Tony, all right, was a great player as well, but not as well known. But as the coach talked about this, Scottie Pippen said, hey, coach, I'm the best player out there. I'm the one who has the best shot. I need to get the ball. And the coach said, no, I want Tony to get the ball. And he knew why. He had a plan in place. Well, Pippen said, hey, listen, if I don't get the ball, I'm not going out on the court. So you know what, the coach did? He sat him down. Well, they ran the play and Tony got the ball and he hit the shot. Now, that is the result, right? But what we're looking for is that we're all team players. In this example, Scottie Pippen was making it about himself and not about the team, okay? And the coach who was guiding the team was trying to keep us straight and narrow. So as a team member, we have to be careful, and this goes to the base of the triangle. Don't focus on yourself. Focus on how the team can be better collectively. And sometimes it may not be apparent to us. We think another solution is a better way, but we have to have trust and we have to hold each other accountable so we can actually really focus on achieving the results we're looking for, right? And it's about having that humility we talked about early on. So when you think about this in terms of HRX, how are we doing as it relates to focusing on results? Take a look in the mirror again, right? Are you making it more about you, or are you making it more about our team members and about the team itself? Write down those notes to the side, and I can't wait to talk more about this on our huddle. Okay, so let's wrap it up. As we can see from the triangle here, the 5 dysfunctions that keep teams from operating at their absolute best is really these 5 dysfunctions. And if we, number one, are honest with our dysfunctions and then look for ways to improve upon them, we can get even better. Even your team, I mean, you guys operate at a super high level, right? But as we talked about before, the point twos, right? We're looking to get even better. And this year, our theme is the team of teams. So we first talked about trust and how we build this, and something that trust doesn't look like, how actually we demand debate in this conflict area. It's going to help us get to commitment stage where we're truly committed, not kind of halfway committed. And then when we have that full commitment, we're in a better position to hold yourself accountable, but your fellow team members accountable. Remember the cell phone example I shared? And then finally, making sure all of this leads to focusing on results, right? Focusing on the outcomes and not making it about yourself. Those are the 5 dysfunctions. We've gone through this, had a good, healthy conversation about it. And after this, what we'd like you to do is be prepared to share some information on how we can get even better in these areas. So as we wrap up this module, the Team of Teams module, we'd like you to jot down on your workbook, what was your biggest takeaway from this exercise? What ahas did you have? And out of the 5 dysfunctions of a team, what's the one you think this team should work on first, right? I'm sure you score relatively high, and by the time you get into this exercise here, you'll see the team evaluation. But in your opinion, what's the one of the 5 that our team HRX should focus on first in terms of improving upon? And then lastly, this is personal for you. What action will you take? And we're going to ask you what that action is on our virtual call. So take a moment, make sure you jot some notes down here. And I look forward to having this healthy team of teams discussion when we get together in our virtual call coming up on Tuesday.